It's confirmed. Palpatine was a clone in The Rise of Skywalker, and we have so many questions. One of the biggest questions Star Wars fans had going into Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, other than how it would handle Rey's parentage or the location of Constable Zuvio, was just how in Corellia's Seven Hells did Palpatine come back from the dead? It's a question that we've been asking since we got our very first teaser trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, which ended with Palpatine's sinister laugh. It became a central mystery of the film, at least from a fan's point of view. Hell, we even did a Nerdist news or two about it last year, where we kinda correctly guessed that it would in fact be Mecha Palpatine. Don't roll your eyes too much at this, because if Mecha Palpatine shows up in Episode 9, I will personally come to your home or place of work and tell you I told you so to your smug face. Is that too much? I told you! I told you. Oh my God. I'm gonna come to your workplace and finally make the announcement like I promised in that video. So how did Palpatine come back to life? Well, the final film in the Skywalker saga never actually answered that question outside a brief throwaway line from Beaumont Kin. You know, Dominic Monaghan's character, who definitely had a name, and he postulated the late Emperor could have returned via cloning or dark Sith sciences. Audiences were basically left to their own headcanon to come up with their own explanation. But now we finally have an answer thanks to The Rise of Skywalker's official novelization from Ray Carson. Sheev Palpatine in Episode 9 was definitely a clone. The dead speak, the living scratch their heads? While the novelization for The Rise of Skywalker doesn't hit bookstore shelves until March 17th, early copies were made available at C2E2 last weekend in Chicago, and one passage near the beginning gave fans the answers for which they were looking. The thrust of this section is from when Kylo Ren first meets Palpatine on Exegol. Are y'all ready for dramatic reading? Because here we go. It said, "All the vials were empty of liquid save one, which was nearly depleted. Kylo peered closer. He'd seen this apparatus before, too, when he'd studied the Clone Wars as a boy. The liquid flowing into the living nightmare before him was fighting a losing battle to sustain the Emperor's putrid flesh." All right, now they could just be using cloning technology to rebuild vital organs, and the putrid flesh is his wrecked body that was left over from the destruction of the Death Star 2, right? Wrong! It goes on to say, "What could you give me?" Oh, sorry, it's Kylo. "What could you give me?" Kylo asked. Emperor Palpatine lived after a fashion, and Kylo could feel in his very bones that this clone body sheltered the Emperor's actual spirit. It was an imperfect vessel, though, unable to contain his immense power. It couldn't last much longer. Well, there you have it. Sheev Palpatine is definitely a clone, and we now have all the answers we'll ever need, right? Except we don't. This answer actually brings up so many more questions, so many that we need to break them down right now. Let's start with, where'd the filmmakers get this idea of a cloned Palpatine? In canon, the Emperor had been obsessed with not dying and telling you tales the Jedi wouldn't, and especially the idea of clones, for a very long time. He did orchestrate both sides of the Clone Wars, after all. It's not his first clone rodeo. However, this isn't the first we've heard of Palpatine returning via cloning either. This idea was first floated way back in the early days of the old Star Wars expanded universe in the Dark Empire comic series from the 1990s. That series saw Palpatine's ghost forced into a clone body on a secret planet that was hard to get to and had a secret fleet of planet destroyers after his defeat on Endor, which sounds pretty familiar, right? It even introduced the idea of the Emperor's decrepit body from the original trilogy being due to the fact that his dark side power wore down his old clone bodies. Now, at the time, this explanation for how the Emperor came to be this way was largely accepted by fans until Star Wars Revenge of the Sith showed us just how Palpatine got those scars. And while Revenge of the Sith and Disney's new EU both contradict Dark Empire as official canon, it appears that Rise of Skywalker writers J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio definitely took inspiration from it. And that brings us to the rest of the questions that many fans are still asking. Like, why couldn't this clone business have been stated definitively within the film? I mean, look, you gave Beaumont a throwaway line speculating about it. Why not have a throwaway line from Hux or Legion General Pride or literally anyone else confirming this instead? Now, another question we have is, why would Palpatine's clone body also be old? Why not get a hot young Sheev? That teen Palps, that's what I want to see. Or at least, I don't know, the version that used to hook up with Rey's grandma. I mean, that would help explain another question we have is, who did Sheev f***? Also along those lines, why would the cloned body be scarred in the exact same way that Palpatine Prime's was after his fight with Mace Windu? Was his DNA just like permanently warped by that fight? Look, I'm sure there's some like space reason that involves midichlorians and we're gonna find out in like the next novelization, but I need to know. Now, these next questions are going to be a little bit of a rapid fire with no real answers, but we're sure an excuse of the Force did it, or dark side abilities that some would consider unnatural will be perfectly acceptable. Like, how did Palpatine transfer his consciousness to a new body? Probably the dark side. Why did Rey have to kill his body for his consciousness to transfer to her body? Well, probably some weird dark side Sith ritual thing, right? And even if it was a clone body, how did Palpatine manage to become all of the Sith like he claims that he is in the film? Now, again, sounds like dark side semantics to us, and if you disagree, well, you're anti-semantic. Is a cloned version of Palpatine with Palpatine's memories actually Palpatine or a completely new distinct person? Honestly, I'm gonna be thinking about that for the rest of the day because why are you gonna hit me with an existential quandary like that? Jesus Christ, this is supposed to be the news. Were the Snoke clones we saw at the beginning of the movie and Snoke himself also failed Palpatine clones? And if so, why would the cloned Snokes have the same scars that the living Snoke had? What scientists keep botching these tube babies? Were some of the Sith Eternal cultists who somehow built then manned the 10,000 Star Destroyers at Exegol also clones? Because how do you account for the massive crew requirements for that many capital ships? Did they just like smash a lot? I hope they're clones. I hope so. And side note, did you know that all of those ships were manned by the children of the Sith Eternal cultist? Because, as Elijah Wood recently tweeted, no. How could we have known? But back to the Palpatine clone questions, are there any other clones of Palpatine out there in the mix just waiting to be activated so they can start his final Star War all over again? I mean, think about it. Why was Rey redirecting his Force lightning and obliterating his body any worse for Palpatine than him getting shafted on Death Star 2 and then straight up exploded? Does this mean we can expect episodes 10 through 12 to come up next and also be about Palpatine making a giant orb-shaped murder weapon? I don't know. I certainly hope not.
It's another Death Star.
Now this next one's on us as fans. Like, why were we all so shocked the answer turned out to be dark side cloning science when the film itself suggested that might be the answer? I mean, that's true, that one's on us. But if that's the case, it brings us to our final question. Why couldn't they have just told us this in the movie? Oh, we already said that one? Well, good, because it bears repeating. It's unfortunate, to say the least, that for a movie that was supposed to close out 4 decades of storytelling and 3 trilogies, it ultimately left us with more questions than we had answers. But hopefully we're gonna get some closure to these questions when we get our hands on the full novelization of The Rise of Skywalker when it drops on March 17th. But what do you folks think? Did you think the answer was clones all along? Clones as far as the eye can see? What was your favorite theory about Palpatine's return, and why was it Mecha Palpatine? And again, who did Sheev smash? Let's discuss. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, why not give us a like and subscribe while you're at it? And if you want to get notified every time we go live with a new show or drop a new video, please feel free to mash that little bell. That way you can be up to date on all the latest theories, news, and rumors in the pop culture world.